Brisbane's wettest day in more than half a century as the heavy rains and winds from ex-tropical Cyclone Alfred continue to move across Australia's east coast. And as attention begins to turn to the recovery, insurance companies have been put on notice amid claims they're ripping off Australians.
A dramatic rescue unfolds in the Lockyer Valley, a woman trapped in a car overturned in floodwaters. It was the busiest 24 hours in the history of Queensland's SES as flash flooding plunges towns across southeast Queensland underwater. A record amount of rain falling on Nambour on the Sunshine Coast, breaking records going back to the 1890s. As the New South Wales Northern Rivers region tonight faces renewed flooding threat. But as the storm begins to ease in some areas, thoughts turn to what comes next.
This is a time where insurance companies can restore some of their reputation. Insurance companies need to do the right thing.
Insurance companies put on notice after a parliamentary inquiry into the 2022 floods revealed families and businesses were forced to wait more than 2 years for their claims and loopholes were used to deny compensation.
I will be prepared to call out insurers who aren't good partners.
In the 2022 floods, a lot of households who thought that they were insured ended up not being fully covered. Maybe it's flood water rather than storm water, or the insurer says that there's a maintenance issue when they haven't kept the leaves out of their gutters.
But for many, there'll be no payout at all. Insurance now out of reach as premiums rise.
It is the most disadvantaged households with the lowest incomes who are in the highest risk areas. They're the households that can't afford to buy insurance because it's those high-risk households who are facing the highest premiums.
The average cost of building insurance claims rose more than 7 times between 2004 and 2022. That caused average premiums to quadruple over the same time period. And all that was before the $10 billion in payouts in the wake of the 2022 and 2023 disasters. Now, many straining under the growing financial burden have dropped flood insurance altogether. An estimated 40% of homes are currently uninsured for flooding, a number that rises to a whopping 77% in high-risk areas.
Many households will have some insurance, but not the flood component because the flood component is very expensive. They're at the mercy of insurers at the moment because of the way that the regulation is structured.
So, with the full extent of Alfred's damage yet to be revealed, how many victims are facing damage that may never be repaired?
Andrew Hall is the CEO of the Insurance Council of Australia and is with us now. Andrew, we've seen claims as recently as 2022 drag on for years, leaving people to this day without compensation, unable to rebuild their houses. Can you promise us it will be different this time?
Well, 2022 was one of the worst events we went through. We're coming off the back of COVID at the time, and the claims numbers topped something like 230,000, which was the largest number of claims ever experienced in an Australian event. I'm confident insurance companies since that time have been rebuilding workforces. Many of the insurance companies are actually based here in Brisbane, so thousands of their staff actually live here in the southeast corner of Queensland and are already on the ground and out there doing the assessments as they're getting access to properties and the like.
And if I'm watching at home and I'm in this sort of situation, when can I expect to have the compensation paid and some accommodation actually functional?
So there's a couple of parts to your policy. In situations where your home has been damaged, the insurer is compensating you with the loss of food and temporary accommodation. If your home has damage, the insurer will do an assessor, present you with that scope of works. You then have the right to agree or disagree with it. In very few cases do we go straight to a cash settlement. That's not fair because people in those situations really rely on the insurer's builder to do the work. They don't have the wherewithal to find builders, and particularly in this market. So insurers work very hard to get their panel of builders in and do the work themselves. So there's 2 parts to this: immediate cash settlement for loss of groceries or temporary accommodation, and then over the medium to long term, the actual job of rebuilding the home.
Andrew, to the wider question, we just heard there in our package, an expert said people who need insurance the most are the ones that are least likely to have it. There seems to be something basically wrong here with the system, doesn't there?
Yeah, well, in Australia, we know that there's 220,000 homes that were built in high flood risk zones with either a 2 or a 5% chance of flooding every year. And over the last 5 years, some of those homes have flooded now 3 times. Less than 1 in 4 of those properties have insurance. So we say to government, probably the most immediate thing you could be doing is 1, remove taxes off insurance premiums. The second thing we need to do is take some of that money that government is collecting, the $8.6 billion a year that's being collected off insurance premiums, and put it into hard infrastructure. Lismore's levy is still the same height it was in 2022. It needs to be raised, but we need the science and the work done on it. But the minute it's done, we need a bucket of money there to raise it. And then there's Rockhampton and Bundaberg. There's a whole list of communities. We've all done the flood studies. They're sitting there, they're waiting to go. We just need the infrastructure funding to protect those properties.
Yeah, well, in Lismore, the mitigation work just wasn't done after 2022. I mean, whose job is it to go and tell people who live in these regions or in these spots within flood-prone towns, look, you shouldn't be living here?
It's a really hard conversation, and it's one that's caught between literally 3 levels of government. When we know that there is roads that have a black spot where people are dying, governments invest money to make those roads safer. Yet we know where all these homes are that keep flooding, but we don't seem to do anything about it other than rush to put everyone back in the same location. And then we wonder why insurance premiums are expensive, and we wonder why the same thing happens over and over again. In fact, it's happening with more frequency. But really, the decision can't be just return to the same thing that they had in the past.
Andrew, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.